Yep. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Pennington County Planning Commission, August 28th, 2023. Recommendations of the Planning Commission on certain items from this agenda will be considered by the Board of Commissioners at their regular meeting on September 5th, 2023 at 10:30 a.m. And as I usually tell everybody, 10:30 is the time for the planning issues, so it does take some time for the commissioners to review those. And every item does not come right up at 10:30. The Planning Commission utilizes speaker request forms, which are available in the commission chambers during the meeting. If you're an applicant, you do not need to fill out a speaker request form. Roll call. Everybody's here, Jerry. Approval of the August 14th minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting that are in your agenda packet? If so, Chair would address a motion.
I move we approve the minutes of August 14th planning meeting.
Second. Moved and seconded to approve August 14th, 2023 Planning Commission minutes. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Same goes through the approval of the agenda. Have you reviewed your agenda and had an opportunity to look at those items? And if you have, the chair would take a motion to approve the agenda as submitted to you in the packet.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda for the Pennington County Planning Commission, August 28, 2023. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Consent agenda.
Good
Morning,
morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Commissioners. Brittany Molitor, Planning Director. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any Planning Commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of this Planning Commission on certain items from this agenda are recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners, who will make the final decision. Item number 3 is conditional use permit amendment review, CU 1501 for Sherry Towner, to review a single-wide mobile home to be used as a permanent residence in an agriculture district, and staff recommends to end conditional use permit amendment CU 1501 with the property owner's concurrence. Item number 4 is conditional use permit review CU 1515 for Gerald Meredith to review a caretaker's residence in a suburban residential district, and staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 1515 with conditions. Item number 5 is conditional use permit review 1725 for Donald Wachowski, Lisa Lorzell as the agent, to review 1 pole barn and 3 greenhouse structures, and to review 1 pole barn structure and to allow 1 pole barn structure to remain when the principal structure is removed from the property in a suburban residential district. And staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 1725 with conditions. Item number 6 is conditional use permit review CU 182, Glenda Robertson, to review a vacation home rental in a rural residential district. And staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 1802 with conditions. Item number 7 is conditional use permit review CU 1832 for Katrina Roseland to review a caregiver's residence in a suburban residential district, and staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 1832 with conditions. Item number 8 is conditional use permit review CU 1833 for Fatter Boys Inc., Bob Fuchs as the agent, to review 3 internally illuminated signs within 1,500 feet of a residential district in a highway service district, and staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 1833 with conditions. Item number 9 is conditional use permit review CU 2155 for David and Helene Weldon to review living in an existing pole barn with living quarters while building a residence in an agriculture district. And staff recommends to end conditional use permit CU 2155 with the applicant's concurrence. Item number 10 is conditional use permit review CU 2164 for Jane Patno. Don Patno was the agent to review a tiny home park model as a primary structure in an agriculture district, and staff recommends approval of the review of conditional use permit CU 2164 with conditions. Item number 11 is Plan Unit Development Overlay Review PU 1901 for Brink Constructors, Inc., BCI Properties LLC, Zane Brink as the agent to review an apprenticeship training facility for linemen of Brink Construction and a Plan Unit Development Overlay. And staff recommends approval of the review of Plan Unit Development Overlay PU 1901 with conditions. Item number 12 is Major Plan Unit Development Amendment Review PU 1906 for Rockerville Goldtown LLC, Pat Hall, to review an amendment to an existing plan unit development to allow for townhomes, apartments, and commercial businesses. And staff recommends to continue the review of Major Plan Unit Development Amendment PU 1906 to the September 25th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Item number 13 is Minor Plan Unit Development Amendment Review PU 2104 for Rockerville Goldtown LLC, Pat Hall, to review an amendment to an existing plan unit development to reduce the setback from 25 feet to 5 feet to allow a water treatment facility and structure. And staff recommends approval of the review of Minor Plan Unit Development Amendment PU 2104 with conditions. Item number 14 is Minor Plan Unit Development Amendment Review PU 2114 for Renee Voss to review living in a recreational vehicle while building a single-family residence. And staff recommends to end Minor Plan Unit Development Amendment PU 2114 with the applicant's concurrence. Item number 15 is Mining Permit Review MP 20-04 for GCC Dakota to review a mining permit operation to extract limestone by drilling and blasting in a heavy industrial district, and staff recommends approval of the review of mining permit MP 20-04 with conditions. And finally, item 16 is mining permit review MP 20-05 for GCC Dakota Inc. to review a mining operation to extract, crush, and stockpile shale in the agriculture district, and staff recommends approval of the review of mining permit MP 20-05 with conditions.
Thank you, Brittany. Any that staff would like to have pulled?
Yes, actually 5, 11, and 15.
All right. Any of the commission would like to have pulled?
11 and 16.
Okay. Anyone else?
Number 12.
Okay. All right. From the audience, anyone would like to have one of those items approved? We do vote on these items as a single vote, and it's usually certainly that's why they call it consent. We agree with staff's recommendation. Anyone from the audience want to speak on any of those items? All right, just for review, so you know, we've got number 5, number 11, number 12, number 15, and number 16 pulled. Does that meet what I've been requested? All right. Chair, take a motion.
Move to approve consent agenda items with the exception of 5, 11, 12, 15, and 16. I believe I got all those.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's perfectly stated. That's the only discussion I can say. I didn't have to throw in the numbers. Discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 5.
Morning, Commissioners. Jason Thennison, Assistant Planning Director. We'd just like to pull this item and continue it to the next Planning Commission meeting so we can make contact with the owner. There's the question whether or not the use has been established or not.
Any questions for Jason? Chair, take a motion.
I move we approve, or we continue item number 5 to the next meeting.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to continue item number 5 to the next meeting. And that date, Jerry, we've got to have it in the motion?
September 11th.
September 11th. Discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We're on to item number 11.
Morning again, Commissioners. We'd just like to continue this one to the September 11th Planning Commission meeting as well. There's a sign permit that needs to be straightened out, so we'd make contact with the property owner to take care of that.
Okay, questions for Jason? Hearing none, Chair would take a motion.
So move.
Second.
Moved and seconded to continue item number 11, overlay review, CU 19-01 to the September 11th meeting. Discussion from the audience. From the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 12.
Item number 12 is a major plan unit development amendment review, PU 1906, to review an amendment to an existing plan unit development to allow for townhomes, apartments, and commercial businesses.
I just had a question on why we're extending this one, or just refresh my mind as to why we're doing that.
Sure. So currently, right now, they have 5 structures out there. One of them has a building permit with a holding tank. None of the rest of them have building permits. They cannot get their building permits until their water system is approved, and their water system has not been approved by the state. Yet there's some information that the state has not received. I did get an email from DANR regarding their water system. They're missing information, submittal information. So there's that. And then their on-site wastewater treatment system, their mound system was put in without permits or without a certified installer. So we can't issue those building permits on those structures until that's all done.
Do we think that we'll have that stuff by the 20 or the?
I'm hoping so. We've been trying to work with the applicant's agent to get that done. We've had several meetings with them.
Okay,
So if anything, it'll be an update at the 25th.
okay, good, thanks.
Brittany, I just wanted to throw in, we don't see the total package, is what I'm saying. We know there's some things behind this that might have made the owner and his representative make that decision. The sun being out, one of them for the summer, and they may not have been in a position to get the water finished, and they opt to deal with you, feeling you're more fair than the state, in being in, in trouble. So I just want to defend them a little as a contractor. Sometimes working Saturday and Sunday is a perfect example. Do you work Saturday and Sunday when the sun's out, when Monday's going to rain? It's that sort of thinking. And I do understand that from people that are developers and contractors. But I would think then that sticks you in a tough position then later to review it. And I think that needs to be on the record. And I'm sure that's what the commissioners were interested in getting on the record was, this is a tough one when you're going ahead and building and it hasn't cleared your review. So I just want to put it on the record that way.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Brittany, you said there's 5 structures.
There's
Each one of those have 2 housing units?
4.
4.
They're 4plexes.
And how many of those 5 actually have building permits?
One, the original one did have a building permit, basically for a model home. It has a holding tank on it right now. So that was kind of the agreement, so they could actually have,
And the
a
other
model.
ones do not have any source of water?
The water system has not been approved by DANR. The other 4 do not have building permits, and the septic has not been approved.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I guess I'm going to disagree with you. I think this has gone way too far with no building permits and without the septic system approval. It's just, I'm glad you're putting a stop to it.
Point well taken. Any other discussion from the commission, from the audience? If anyone wants to speak on this matter, you can certainly, I don't have a request form, but you can surely come up and weigh in on it. Okay? Chair would take a motion.
I'll move that we approve the continuance to the 25th of September.
Second?
Second.
Approved. Move to and seconded to, per staff's recommendation, continue the review of major planned unit development number 19-06 to the September 25th meeting. That's the motion that's on the table. Discussion from the audience. From the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we're on to item number 15. That's a simple one. We've just got a condition in there that you guys have been taking out, and that's the only reason I brought it up, and I know you will. So it was the condition in regards to the statement of understanding, and the commissions are all
Yes.
aware of that. Go ahead.
So Cody Sack, environmental planner. So yeah, we don't do statement of understandings anymore. So condition number 8 needed to be removed. It just didn't get removed from this report. And then also condition number 9, usually with mining permits, we review them after 3 years when they're first initiated and then 5 years. So staff would like to change condition 9 to be reviewed in 5 years instead of 3.
Right, and that now becomes condition number 8. Is that
Correct. Yep.
All right. I have no hangups on that. You've answered my questions, Cody. Any other questions for Cody? Well, the chair will make the motion since I asked to have this poll. I move to approve per staff's recommendation with the removal or omission of item number 8, changing item number 9 to the 8th condition. So there would be 8 conditions, and condition number 8 is switched or changed to 5 years, not 3. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to, per staff's recommendation, approve mining permit 20-04 with changes omitting number 8. Number 9 becomes number 8, and number 8 will now list 5 years, not 3 years. Discussion from the audience. From the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Cody. Now we're on to 16. I believe that's the last one we pulled.
Well, question, and it's no biggie, but in looking, and I haven't gone out and looked at this, but in looking at the map, these houses are pretty close to this operation. No dust problems or,
No, so staff has not received any complaints from the site, documented complaints. I don't know if they call the city of Rapid City and they don't get forwarded to us, but we've had no complaints that we've received, so I can't go by that there hasn't been any. I haven't heard anything from the state either. This operator's pretty good. They're one of the only ones who actually submit their annual report on time. And I do have their email, so if we do get complaints, which we haven't, I just shoot them an email and tell them that they need to get it fixed, so.
that's all I've got, sir.
Okay.
I make a motion that we pass 20-05.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second to approve MP 20-05 per staff's recommendation. Discussion from the audience. From the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 17.
Commissioners, item number 17 is ordinance amendment OA 23-01 to amend section 319, the vacation home rental ordinance. And I believe that this was a motion to put on the agenda right after the consent items to go through the ordinance line item by line item.
Yes. That motion was last meeting to go through, and I believe we understood that you would be the one leading that. And so you can decide how you want to section it off as far as I'm concerned. I don't think anybody from the commission would care how you present them.
I think the way that we did it before was by page. So look at the page, see if there's any changes on that page number. That way it can be tracked in the minutes by that page number.
Yeah, that's
And the
similar
section.
to what we did with the mining ordinance. That's correct. Thank you. Anybody have objections to that? All right. Then we'll go ahead and take off. Item number 17 is the ordinance amendment OA 23-01, and that was published for review today. Go ahead, Brittany.
All right, so page 1, is there any recommended or suggested changes on page 1?
I would say you're on to page 2, Brittany.
Okay. Page 2.
Just for the audience, the changes that have been done by the committee, by discussions previously on what we called the memo, are indicated on our pages in the agenda, as well as we have all the background letters that have been, and emails that have been sent in to us. They're numerous. Otherwise, I'd go through and even name the names like we do on other ones.
So for clarification, the ones that are in the yellow and the green are previous motions or changes by the commission during the review of the memo.
I would say the biggest thing on that is the lot less than 1 acre. And this is basically ended up per the VHR committee's recommendation. All we did was split it where it's on the special use permit, it stays at 1 acre, but you can review under conditional use permit less than 1 acre. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Any other questions on page 2 for Brittany? Let's move to page 3.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll just put my 2 cents in. I still disagree with the density, but we're a long ways from it at this point, so until we hit the top there, it's probably not going to make any difference anyway.
Ron, you look like you want to say
Well,
something.
Mr. Chair, my question is density. We're looking at the ones that are legally permitted, gone through the process. How many of those are out there that are flying under the radar? You know, when you sit there and look at density. So I'll say it again. I've said it once. I'll say it again. I really think we have to put some emphasis on not so much going out and looking at the ones that exist and trying to find something wrong with them, but let's try to identify the ones that are flying illegally under the radar. I know that's a little tough to do. Normally, this is done on a complaint basis, but I don't know what the answer is there. But I get so many emails from operators that are doing it legally, complaining about the ones that are out there doing it illegally. And they send me articles across the United States where communities are really cracking down on the ones that are illegally, or operating illegally. So that's my 2 cents worth, Charlie.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I couldn't agree more with Ron. I think that's a compelling problem. And people are riding free and forcing others to comply. And we seem to have no mechanism to change that. And I think it's unfortunate. But my general impression is that nobody seems to have a tool that would allow enforcement to be, speeded up or more effective. And if that's the case, then I guess we pass legislation and approve legislation that has little or no meaning, at least in this particular case. It's unfortunate, and maybe it's an insurmountable problem that we cannot solve this. And so we'll just have to live with it. But I do think it's unfortunate that we're going to bear this for some time, so.
Thank you, Jim. Having sat through the committee's reviews for every meeting, the committee really took this into consideration. They spoke upon this subject more than they spoke on any subject in regards to vacational rentals. And they felt they tried to add some teeth to things, one of the things being the license number that has to be in the ads. But I have to say that they also thought, the commissioners, and here I'm picking on Ron, that they would take some of this money from catching the ones that aren't operating, and some of that would go back into Brittany's budget, where in fact, even if it had to be a part-time person that was specifically designed to review the vacation home rental, that was not a bad idea. They actually spoke about that if there wasn't enough to make a full-time job, we should still look at a part-time job out of some of the collections, and we're not going to have collections for penalties. They were adamant, and I believe it was unanimous about increasing the penalty to that to be quite an extreme penalty versus our other ordinances. So I'm going to stick with the committee. The committee was appointed by the commissioners. I'm going to leave it the way they wrote it. How the commissioners see on moving it forward from their level, we'll leave it up to them. But I'm going to stick with the committee since they were appointed by the commissioners.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
and we do this realizing that we can always change things going forward. This isn't like it isn't something that can't be amended and reviewed later on.
that's correct. Thank you. Any other comments on that particular, the density item?
I have a comment that'll probably make me very unpopular, but I would like to see either a contractor or a staff person that focuses on finding the VHRs that are not registered and bringing them in. And also, it would be interesting to know how many are registered as owner occupied for taxes, so.
One of the things I do want to point out, and Brittany and Megan pointed out in the meeting, I believe also the Laura from the Rapid City organization,
No, Elevate.
yes, that we still have to remember there's a considerable amount of them in incorporated areas, and I'm picking on Rapid here a little bit. There's a lot more in Rapid sitting right around us here than we're in control of as well. So maybe if we do a better job, perhaps that'll bleed off on other things. Anybody from the audience want to speak on density before we move forward on the ordinance? If anybody opposes and wants that pulled or reworded, now's the time to do it. Thank you. Go on, Brittany.
All right, page 4, if there's any changes.
Item 5.
All right.
Mr. Chair, we talk about only UL approved propane professionally installed natural gas pits and grills permitted. It was also brought up, we might add to that, no open flames, something to that extent. I'm not sure how you would put that in to cover everything.
I don't think that's a bad idea. It seems to me our fire marshal for the county seems to refer to it more on open flame. But if we added something to the first sentence with open flame and then just left the following are prohibited, I think we'd be all right. Is there a way to do that?
We already have it.
Yeah, look at
A4?
right here. Any other open flame which is not specifically allowed above.
Yeah.
It's already prohibitive.
Okay, it's already there. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
number 4, it says, parking requirement. It says 1 parking spot. And I still have a problem with that because how big is a parking spot? Is it 8 by 20 or is it 16 by 40? And then I don't know if there's any way to identify what a parking spot is.
We actually have it defined in our parking section. It's 9 by 18.
Okay, so then could we add that in here somewhere to reference that so people really understand what size a parking spot is?
So just
The
reference
ordinance, the ordinance section, you say on the B
or A.
or A? Yes.
So it should say per section 310, PCCO section
Of
310.
reference is all I'm suggesting.
I wouldn't have any objection to that. Is there a motion to that?
I would so move that we add that.
Is there a
reference
second?
that,
Second.
Moved and seconded. Karen seconded, Jerry. Discussion from the audience? From the commission? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. And then that will be in the new one you published before it goes on. If we take action on it today, before it would go on then to the commissioners. Is that correct? That's the first thing we've changed, because this has already been published. Thank you. I just wanted to make that part of the record. You all understand this gets published every time we amend it. And they have a waiting period and a proper procedure they go through.
Well, it gets published as far as the agenda. So because there hasn't been, once this is done, and you finalize it if it's done today, Jerry will advertise it for the Board of Commissioners meeting with all of the changes and all the recommendations from the Planning Commission. So all of the changes that have come in prior meetings and this meeting will get published. It won't be the next Board of Commissioners meetings. It might be 2 or 3, just depending on how the advertisement falls.
Thank you for that clarification, Brittany. We're still on page 4. Any other comments on page 4? Go ahead, Brittany.
Page 5.
I only had 2. One about said the special flood hazard area, additional exterior excavation plan is required to be posted outside. I don't know that you gain anything from outside or inside the building, would you? But are you talking about a sign they stick in the yard or on the building? I guess that one
I
fogged me a little. And then my second one was, we have been flexible and need to be flexible in regard to Department of Revenue sales tax license. A number of operators of vacation home rentals work with national firms that are required by the state of South Dakota to have sales tax license. They actually collect the money, and then they forward that sales tax to South Dakota to meet the laws that are already established. So I think we're going to have to add some wording that, and you had different wording than mine, but I put, or their designated agents. We've done this a little bit in the past for local ones that are already in the business, and they're the contact person. But I was pointed out that a number of these companies actually file the sales taxes on a national level to South Dakota. So you had some wording you would prefer there, Brittany.
Or it could just be or designee,
Designee?
whoever, because that's typically kind of the language we use.
All right.
And did you want it also for 13, for 12 and 13? Or do the owners, I believe, have to have one under the Department of Health?
I stayed away from some of those because I don't know what the state requirements are, whether theirs says owner. And we've always stayed with owner because I think it comes from the state with owner on it. It has to be. That's
It does
what I
have the
thought.
owner's name on it.
Okay, then I don't have a problem as long as we're meeting the laws. It's just that we've been a little flexible on our own past ordinance, allowing other people, their contact people, to have the sales tax license. The whole idea is to get the sales taxes paid. So that, and then what about the outside? What do you think on that, Brittany? I don't know why it says outside. Maybe we should just have posted.
I think it just could be posted in a prominent location.
Okay,
And I think it could be that simple. Whether it's in their book, whether it's in like on the back of the door, like a hotel
right.
type of thing.
I would go with that. Outside just didn't make any sense to me. All right, I'd make a motion for that, then we can discuss it if you care.
Yeah.
All right, I would make a motion that number 9 read in a prominent location, and number 12 read all owners or their designee must have a Department of Sales Tax license. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second. Now it's open for discussion. Go right ahead.
Okay, I'm going to raise something that probably isn't even germane to this, but sort of. There's this whole thing about enforcement. I keep coming back to this, and I keep thinking, now, all these people who are not abiding by the county and city ordinances regarding vacation home rentals are paying their sales tax.
Exactly.
Yeah. And would it be possible for us simply to say that the state would require that they also be, in order to be in compliance, provide their license number in the counties which have those ordinances before they, in order to be consistent with the state's taxing process.
You're saying the state provide us or the?
Well, the question would be, does the state need to pass this kind of legislation, or could we stipulate that for the state to collect that? If the state of South Dakota said, I'm sorry, but we've got to have your county license number for a vacation home rental. And the person would go, oh, my God, I don't have one of those, do I? And I don't know if we could actually enforce it, but we would certainly get their attention. I mean, I'm still frustrated by the fact that we're walking away from, the process of enforcement. And so, I mean, that simply came to mind because I happen to know somebody who is not, does not have a license, but he's very good about paying his taxes, by God, and which is wonderful, of course. But I just wish we could devise some kind of legislative or bureaucratic device that would give us some leverage in that regard. So I raise that only because it vaguely relates to this.
Please introduce yourself for the record.
Absolutely. Alexa Mueller, Pennington County State's Attorney's Office, just to quickly respond to you, Jim, just to provide some insight. What you're discussing is a legislative remedy. Unfortunately, with our ordinance, we can't dictate what the state can and cannot do. If that's legislation that the Planning Commission wishes to propose, that's certainly something we can look at. But unfortunately, that's not a remedy that we can include, that we can enforce upon the state in our ordinance.
Can the state ask the question?
The state can do whatever they want to do. We can't ask them to ask us. I guess I'm.
Maybe it would become common knowledge very quickly that you don't have to answer that question, but if the question were asked, anyway, I understand what you're saying, and your answer is exactly kind of what I thought you would say, but it's a thought. Once again, and I don't want to belabor this and slow the process down, because I do think it's something that requires much more thought than what we've got the opportunity to have here, so anyway.
Sure, just wanted to provide some clarity for the record.
Mr. Chair.
Brittany? Go ahead, Ron.
Well, one thing that the county can do, they could take some time and go on the internet and find these that they're advertising and confirm that they're in our system. If they're not, then I say go after them.
Yeah.
And let's make some money on this deal.
I agree.
We're just looking the other way. I don't know if we needed another full-time employee, but I really think we need to start
Yeah, I do too.
a little more effort in identifying the ones that are flying under the radar.
And you could simply do it randomly. You could go and say, we're not picking out on anybody, we're just going to do it randomly. We're going to take 50 names on, Airbnb or whatever, who are not, we know, licensed, and we're going to send them a little letter and say, we noticed, and give them the opportunity to come clean. And, many would ignore it and some wouldn't, but at least we'd get some, an immediate indication of whether this would work, and I think it would. I think most people deep down inside want to be compliant. I really do. And for the people who are operating, are good operators, and this person I referred to earlier is a damn good operator. He does everything Airbnb says, and he goes beyond that. And to come in compliance, he wouldn't have to do anything probably other than pay the fees. But anyway, I think that's something that really does need to be looked at. And I hate to see government, sometimes it gives that looming sort of presence. They're out there to get you, But the reality is there's a lot of good people who are paying those fees and supporting county government. And, if they don't pay their real estate taxes, we don't forgive them. And this is the same thing. It's a business. And I think we need to be more persuasive and insistent. So
I agree 100%, and the committee did as well. And I agree that we're putting this on the record prior to getting to the commissioners. The committee was very strong about this, and that was why the license numbers. So they also thought of it. They also thought of it, and I'm picking on the commissioners here a little bit about to get a part-time person to do some help for the planning department.
Mr. Chair, it could even be a part-time person, but the idea is to create a level playing field.
Right.
For the ones that operate legally.
But I wanted to go one further and stick up for the previous two committees. They also thought of this, but they thought about it trying to get a list from the state I think if you remember, Brittany, and the state was not going to provide us a list
They want to
of
know.
operators that had licenses, but they did allow us on an individual basis to request. Wasn't that not correct, Brittany?
Exactly.
We had to request on an individual basis for them. They weren't going to give us a list.
Well, they do have a list of ones that have licenses on their website.
They do now.
In the past, it has been, with violations that we don't necessarily go out and look for them. They're on a complaint basis only. That has been the direction in the past. I do believe that there was some discussion during the changing of this ordinance, that there was some compliance period where some of these operators that were operating outside of it saying, hey, we have this new process, we have this new procedure, here it is, you'll have a certain amount of time to come into compliance. I think that was the intent of the committee, that staff do that, like reach out to these individuals, try to get them into compliance, say, hey, this is our new process, this is our new procedure, come into compliance, doing some kind of, notifications, some getting some like information blast out there so people would come into compliance. I know that was discussed by the committee.
There was a separate motion of a moratorium period that would be recommended to the Board of Commissioners to establish some moratorium period. I don't believe, did they pin down a time?
I think it was 6 months, 180 days. And that's what I was looking for in here to see if it got in there. But I believe that there was some discussion of the 180 days for
Okay.
everyone to come into compliance, get their conditional use permit, get their special permitted uses, and get registered. I think was the intent, to give them kind of a time period, kind of a
All right.
get out of jail free card, so to speak. Just say, hey, let's all get into compliance. So I do remember that discussion.
Thank you. Anything else on that item?
Sure.
Yes.
Brittany, you said that you had a direction not to try to identify the ones that were
So in the
operating
past,
illegally?
our office, with the ordinance enforcement, has been somewhat directed not to necessarily target people, like go out and look for
But who
violations.
told you?
That was from a previous commission, like
So
commissioners.
we could change that. This commission could say, hey, we need to start cracking down, so.
Yes,
I
you
think
could,
that's-
and I would prefer that direction coming from
Right.
the board or the planning commission. Otherwise, it can seem that we're looking for or targeting certain.
I think we can all agree that District 1 is the one that really gets, has all, the majority of the vacational rentals, and I'm the one that gets the phone calls, and I just think we need to be doing something more than we're doing now.
And that is why our office has taken that position of a complaint basis only, with most of those to not go out looking for violations.
Okay?
Any other discussion? And our motion is to add or their designee to item number 12. Anyone from the audience? From the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
number 14, all of the items in there, except for E, are pretty understandable. That one is kind of vague to me, and I don't know if the office is going to give suggestions on how they do a severe weather shelter plan. Each one's going to be different. If you don't add the right weather condition in your plan and something happens, then are you liable for that, or how's that going to work?
Kevin, can we go ahead and kill the first? We do have a motion on the table about the designee.
No, was that just for that one? I'm sorry. I thought
That's all right.
I thought we were talking about page 5.
I was going to ask on this page yet, there's more items.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion in regards to adding or their designee? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Go ahead,
As
Kevin.
I just said. Any thoughts on that? That just seems, either we need to give some kind of a suggestion to the people as to what a severe weather shelter plan is, or the things that must be listed in there, or we just say, go find your spot.
I do believe that this was discussion, I think one of the committee members had brought this up as part of it, as part of
There was already some approved that have some floodplain as well as floodway. And the committee was very strong about any that were floodway. They have to have something to help their guests.
Well, they're prohibited in
Understand.
floodways, but
What?
they're prohibited in floodways
Right.
still.
But I think some have passed or some are coming. I don't know why the committee.
Their access may be in floodway, but
Okay.
the actual structure cannot be, I think is
All
what
right.
the,
Maybe that was it. I know the committee spent a number dividing those two conversations, plain versus way. What do you think we ought to do, Kevin?
I don't have a good answer. You know, you've got hail that could be bad, you've got lightning that could be bad, you've got tornadoes that could be bad. We don't have a lot of tornadoes. But, you know, we have any number of severe weather situations, and I'm not sure you'd respond in the same way to every different one.
It's a good point. Might be something where we're gonna have to send forward in our recommendation that's gonna have to be looked, because this new, what do they call it, the shear one? That did happen in the last 2, 3 years. We've had some of that straight shear that wasn't expected to be in the hills before, and we've had several of those. I understand what you're saying. They're similar to a tornado, but I guess they're 75 or 80 miles an hour, but they clear a path like is all.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could this be something that severe weather is already defined by NOAA, the National Weather Service? They put out severe weather warnings all the time. So if they are putting out a severe warning, that could define what a severe weather item is. And then their suggestion on how to deal with it. If it's a lightning strike, you're not supposed to be outside in an open area, playing in the water, so forth, so on. So it could be following suggestions of that weather agency. Could formulate that plan. Just a thought.
I don't have
Go
any
one
problem with
step
that.
further.
No, go ahead.
No, one step further. On number 10, you've got the plan should include locations of a disaster supply kit. All right, what's a disaster supply kit? It's the same thing. I mean, it's there, just like what Kevin's talking about, and neither one explain anything.
so I can answer on the disaster supply kit. I know our emergency management office has a whole section on their webpage about emergency disaster kits and things like that. They actually have a public service announcement, and they do different things to the community on those.
So should
So
we?
there is some,
Yeah, so should we put something on here, refer to something or other of the Pennington County disaster page?
we
I mean,
could,
right here, this doesn't say anything. How do they know what to find? I guess I thought that was a little, I don't know, didn't make a lot of sense. I know what you're saying, but how do they know to look in that page?
I mean, that would be my first inclination is to look, I know our EM does that. They provide that as a public, I mean, they go over that. They do kind of a public service type announcement when it comes in those types of seasons, I guess.
And the only other thing I can think of, we are in an area where we do get the alerts through the phone system now, but we also have vacation home rentals that are not in, what would you call it, Wi-Fi or those areas.
Good Wi-Fi.
I live in an area where it has no wireless phone service, and there are a number of them in the hills. But they do get, everybody's phone gets pinged on these. I believe you can block it out, but if you don't, then your phone pings. But I don't know that there's anything we can do beyond that to help what Kevin's, what defines it, these different things. And doesn't that alert cover a number of things, Kevin, if I remember right? Have you had any looked into it? It's everything from Amber, from the child thing to, it's quite a broad list of items that will come on your phone. Go ahead.
I think it probably depends on what kind of phone you've got or whatever, but yeah, get reports for tornadoes or something coming up in the area, thunderstorms. Going back to Mike said on number 10 there, yeah, where we even look for the disaster supply kit shelter areas. That's just on the emergency management group that they have that, or would our people know that?
Yeah, they are the experts. I mean, that would be my recommendation is to follow their guidelines, because I know they have guidelines. They have a webpage that has all of this.
Is that something you'd like to
Maybe we
get in
should
a
add,
motion?
yeah, maybe we should add something like that, where they can even find it.
Could you word that so it would fit what you're aware of and the people that are using it, they're aware of?
And I can also reach out to Dustin, the EM director, maybe to get some guidance on some language for here
Yeah, that'd probably be good.
as well.
Could your motion be wording to come from the planning department prior to publication?
It'd be perfect.
Is that something you could live with? Okay,
Is that a motion? Can I second it?
you sure can. We're doing an individual item motions. It's moved and seconded to add wording from the planning department to be issued prior to publication. That's our motion. And we want it in regards to the safety kits. I suppose we better add that, you think, Kevin?
Yep.
Two Kevins, both of you. All right. Any discussion from the audience? From the commission? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Any other items on number 5? I guess you can go on to 6. On that same list, I had one there. There was a lot of discussion about leaving the statement, guests are expected to be courteous to all neighbors and to respect property owners, as part of an ordinance. How do you require that or hold them to it? So I still see that as a little vague. Other than that, I mean, it's a good idea. We certainly expect it. But it's vague enough that it's tough for an operator or anybody to do. And what do people? We certainly know there's a difference in courtesy from people 60 years old and those that are 20. So how do we define that sort of thing? Legislate it, I guess, is the word. That's all I've got to say. I'd leave it there. And I think that's why the committee left it. Again, I support what the committee, after they discussed, came up with their submission. I mean, they did it. I can't commend them enough. They did a fine job of submissions here. Go ahead, Brittany. Anything else on page 6?
I do.
Yes, go ahead.
This is something I noticed when I was reading through the information for, I think it was Santa Fe, and I liked that they had a respond in a reasonable time changed to like within an hour and maybe a shorter period of time at night. I don't know if that's something we want to do, but what's a reasonable time? You know, what if it's a day? That doesn't help the neighbors.
I saw that spot too, and I thought it was very interesting, whereas the local one had to be there or was it something if you had to be there within 30 minutes? I think it was hours. If it was between 10 and 7 maybe, then you had to be there within 30 minutes.
Because if you're calling at night with a complaint, it's probably loud noises, and it would be nice to have a response back right away, not wait. So
I
I
agree.
guess I'd like a definition of reasonable time.
Well, and what's reasonable in a thunderstorm, in a downpour, as opposed to a clear night? I mean, there's some variables built into this thing. What's reasonable? I don't know how you put that.
Yeah, and reasonable time to respond doesn't mean they have to show up. It means they have to pick up the phone and call back. So,
That's a good point, because farther down in number 4, the failure of the local contact to comply with this section shall be deemed as noncompliance.
Yeah.
So that's pretty serious. In other words, that could trigger a review. Am I correct, Brittany? Of
It
their,
could, yes.
it's a good point. What do you think reasonable time is? We've got 50 miles and you've got the Black Hills.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
statutes and ordinance are filled with language. And language is imperfect. And I don't think that we can probably, because it's going to be different. Reasonable under certain circumstances. We can't define all the circumstances that would be reasonable. And so this particular instance, we would have to make a judgment based on the circumstances, and each one would be distinctive. And I don't think we can come up with some kind of numerical value that indicates and gives this more a precision. I mean, reasonable in one circumstance is one thing, you know? Like you say, if there was something going on that made it difficult to respond reasonably, I think the term can be very useful because it says you should have responded more quickly under the circumstances which were unique and undefined in the ordinance because the ordinance can't define all of the possibilities that might arise that are difficult. And so that expression, I think, is useful. And I don't think we can, maybe I'm wrong about this. You guys have got a more precise view of the world than I do, but I just think reasonable is actually a useful term, and the circumstances will determine if that person has violated that, situation. And if we can come up with a more precise formula, that's great, but I think that's difficult, and I think reasonable is useful.
I think if we leave the reasonable time wording in there, we might as well get rid of number 4 because it could be reasonable for any number of reasons, and then there's no non-compliance, so.
Did you notice, and maybe you didn't, I read every one of those research ones, there was a number of them 24 hours too. Used 24 hours, one day.
That's not reasonable.
But
Yeah,
that's the problem.
And based upon the severity of the problem, that's quite a long time.
I mean, yeah, the 24-hour thing makes some sense because it's precise. You're right. But if things are really in bad shape, 24 hours would be ridiculous, And how can you define all these? So reasonable is a device by which we say, let's look at the circumstances. Any reasonable person would have done this, or that. You didn't do that. And most people would agree that you made a mistake. And so it forces people to, if anything, err in favor of responding more, quickly than they might.
I'm not recommending a change. It struck me that some communities or some counties are very specific about time to respond. And, we may at some point get to that.
Mr. Chair, why don't you just have them refer to Webster's dictionary, what reasonable is?
The ultimate thing's reasonable, whether it's 1 hour, 24 hours, is basically going to still be decided by a planning commission and a board of commissioners.
That's right.
That is true. Because we could go back and say, well, they didn't respond for 2 hours and we had it at 1 hour.
We'd be the judges?
Yeah, you're going to end up, because it's going to end up coming
That's
before us
gonna
on
be
a
an
complaint
uncomfortable deal.
basis.
Yeah.
What I was getting is on the complaint basis for the review, the way the ordinance is written.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Alexa Moeller, Pennington County State's Attorney's Office. If I may make a suggestion, I understand the word reasonable is very subjective in certain situations, but it can be objective. In a lot of areas of the law, when we cite to the word reasonable, and in this particular circumstance, a potential suggestion to discuss would be reasonable under the totality of the circumstances. As you mentioned, Jim, when you look at all the circumstances surrounding the incident or the complaint, what's reasonable under those circumstances, that might be a more legitimate way to look at that word reasonable. Just a suggestion.
Excuse me, then it would have more severity, let's say, in one circumstance than it might have in another.
Correct. When you look at the totality of the circumstances surrounding the event or the complaint for which they're calling, then you can determine, well, it wasn't reasonable if there's a fire, right? 24 hours isn't reasonable. But if it's a noise complaint, that reasonable definition might be different than if there's an actual loss of life or limb. So when you look at that phrasing under the totality of the circumstances, that gives you some room to look at exactly what's going on.
Yeah, the difference if your water system has failed and your toilets are not working and,
Or you
or
park
maybe,
all your vehicles on somebody else's property.
yeah,
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 that's
okay,
a good,
I like that.
and we do get a lot of that in our reviews from the local people that are around these, especially parking. We hear that very, very often, trespassing.
So who would judge this, is what's reasonable, who's
Oh,
gonna say?
eventually we're going to.
It's gonna come
The
back to us.
commission, yeah, under this, because it'd be a failure if the complaining person didn't, and then you also felt that it was not reasonable, then it would be before us.
Right, and there is actually a provision, and it gets down farther, and it's in our special permitted use and our conditional use for revocation hearings. So if there's continual violations and continual issues with their permit, one time and it's corrected, probably wouldn't bring them in front of you. If it's habitual, it would. So that's kind of how we look at it as far as the hearing.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would make a motion that we add the language provided by our state's attorney, that responding in a reasonable time under the totality of the circumstances.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to add the wording that you added. I didn't get it all
Under the
written down.
totality of the circumstances,
Thank you.
after
I
reasonable time.
appreciate that, Karen. Discussion from the audience, from the commission.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I agree with what Karen said, but that's going to be kind of fluid too. But I do believe that, as you mentioned, we want to put more responsibility on those owners. You know, I've said this all along, that there are some great owners that will respond within 5 minutes. And if there's owners that blow it off for 6 or 10 or 24 hours, and that does come up, you know, we almost need some kind of a grading system, like you said. If they continue to get complaints and they're not responding to them, that's where we need to have some way to take more action and say, hey, you shouldn't have a license. So how we get to that point, I don't know, but that's my feeling on that.
Speaking for sitting in with the committee, that's exactly what they were headed to, too. Those those operators with special use permits, they felt had additional responsibilities to perform correctly and within normal acceptable limits, maybe is the way to put it, versus a conditional use permit, of which then we review item by item when we go through. So that's a good point, Kevin. The committee themselves discussed that when you are on an administrative style approval, you have a responsibility to do a better job. So that's a good point, and the committee did think of that.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Anything else on number 6?
Number 15, miscellaneous requirements, all operators, blah, 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 in accordance with South Dakota administrative rules. Where will they find these?
So if you look up under the Department of Health, under the administrative rules, there's a specific requirement for vacation home rentals. And I don't know it off the top of my head, the actual administrative rule number. We could add that chapter.
That's all I'm getting
Okay.
at, is I look at that, you know, deer in the headlights, like, whoop, what's this?
So just add the chapter so they're aware of which
Something
one.
they can, reference to, I think would make it a lot easier.
You want to make
I would-
I'll
we
second
have
that.
tried to do that in a number of places in this
I'll
ordinance.
second Mike's
Okay,
motion.
been
Mr.
moved and
Chair.
seconded to add the South Dakota, what would you call it, administrative statutes
Right, it'd be the whatever chapter that
Yep.
it's,
Yeah.
that
Very
that
good.
discusses it.
discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We're still on item, or page 6. Anything else from page 6? Brittany?
Page 7.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
on 7, special permitted use. The planning department receives a substantiated, there again, this is going to be very subjective, substantiated. What is a good example of that? Because I've had neighbors say at 1 o'clock this morning, they were shooting firearms, they got in a fight. And so I hardly doubt that you're going to get Pennington County Sheriff out there at 1 in the morning unless it's almost a serious crime. Our code enforcement officer is not up at 1 o'clock in the morning. So if the neighbor says, does he have to take photos, videos, what is substantiated? Because most of the time it's going to be the neighboring property owner.
Right, so typically what we look at under that kind of standard is Dwayne, our ordinance enforcement officer, needs some kind of proof, because we look at it from a perspective, if our state's attorney actually had to take action, would it be something that they could use as far as, because if we do revoke this, let's say the planning commission does revoke it and they appeal it, all of that information goes. So we have to make sure that we actually have some kind of evidence that it actually occurred. So whatever that is, and it could be,
A personal testimony from the neighbors, would that be
repeated.
enough?
It could be. In some instances, a lot of times pictures or video is more helpful. When we look at vacation home rental type things, when we get complaints, usually it's validated by, obviously testimony from the neighbors. It's usually pictures of cars that have different license plates over multiple days, listings on sites or, websites. So those are typically the things that we look for.
So then I'm thinking you're going to say a video of the incident, a picture of the incident, or a police report.
Something, correct. That's typically the ones that we use as far as, because when you're looking at, bringing something in front of this commission to revoke a property right, we have to look at it pretty seriously as far as that we have some kind of
I
proof.
just wanted everybody to understand
Right.
what they're going to need for evidence if they're going to, if it's going to be substantiated,
Right,
that's all.
and when we bring it in front of you, if we do bring it in front of you as far as a revocation hearing, we have to have some kind of substantiated complaint and some kind of evidence, because you're removing somebody's property right, basically. So that's how we look at it.
Okay.
Additional items from page number 7. Ron, did you want to make any proposed revision to that complaints item?
The only thing I could, I don't know what a person could add. I could, other than the substantiated, could be a video or a photograph or some kind of a law enforcement report, but I think that's too much to go in this ordinance, so.
I think it
I
goes
think
back.
it's important that the commission understands that this isn't, the neighbor can't call up and say, this happened, and that's not going to carry any weight at all.
However, as a commissioner on the planning commission a number of times, I do take in consideration when I see a number of neighbors, I do look at the addresses and try to plot them. And the word of our constituents out there, I think, has to be important to a commissioner. And I see one or two or the same complaint or a historic, habitual situation. I do take that in consideration as a substantiated when I'm listening to the testimony. I guess I got to be honest, you have to. I think you deserve, the property owners deserve it as well as the operator. Anyway,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
the only other thing I would add, if there is a confirmed substantiated complaint, is that enough, or do you need 3? Is there some kind of a threshold that you really?
There actually is in our ordinance under the revocation hearing. So it has to be, basically, if we get a substantiated complaint, we reach out to the property owner, we work with the property owner, and they fail to remedy whatever that complaint would be, then that kind of escalates it. But the property owner does have an opportunity to remedy. So if the complaint does come in, we reach out to them, and they do have an opportunity to remedy it. Typically, if they do not, after, trying to work with our office, then it gets escalated up either to a revocation hearing or to the state's attorney's office.
So you referenced an ordinance, so is that something we could reference in that sentence?
It actually does if you go it further down
Yeah.
in here to the appeals, termination, or
511.
revocation. It does have that in
Okay.
there.
Yep.
No sense in having it twice.
Yeah.
And the actual determination also rests with it. The state's attorney's office makes the final determination on proceeding forward, don't they?
It depends. Under the termination or revocation, it is a hearing in front of
It
this
is.
board.
Okay.
Correct. So they do have that, and then they also have the appeal. They also have that. So if they don't agree with this commission's
So
determination.
there is additional citizen input, in other words. before
Correct.
it's-
So the revocation hearing is a hearing that's actually, it's published, it's noticed, so it's not anything that's under the radar. So the applicant is aware, the neighbors are aware, so it's a hearing. For
Anything
both
else,
sides.
Ron?
So,
Oh, I'm good, thank you.
Any other items from page 7? Brittany, go ahead.
Item 8. Actually, the only one is it says right here that the fees set forth in section 511, currently they're in this K. They're in 319K.
Right.
So this right here should be changed to that 319K. We'll have to update, once these are approved and effective, then we'll add them to our section 511.
And then I had one on 3. I thought we should indicate there's been some confusion that license fee dash 2 years or something. Noting that that's not a yearly fee.
Oh, you want it put every 2 years?
I think it has to be cleared up. We've had a number of people contact, I think all of us as commissioners, in regards to $1,000 a year. So I'd like to see that to help us out. Because the committee, this was a first sort of thing, just for all of you. I even advised them that fees are in the ballpark of the Board of Commissioners, period. And they still were very vehement, very strong about this, and that's fine. They did a good review and why they wanted to. And that license fee was to establish a license number that's available through the planning department, and they felt a $500 fee every other year was not exceptional.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so, and I'm not that familiar, but for a license fee, would that be for one 911 address, and it could be 4 bedrooms, and it's 1,000, or it could be one building with just 1 bedroom?
It's just one unit. So a vacation home rental is a unit that's rented in its entirety, so it would be for that unit.
Because I've had folks reach out and say, being the equality between the same fee for a 4-bedroom versus a 1-bedroom, that was their concern. So I don't know how you address that.
And it wasn't, it was just per unit, irregardless of the number of bedrooms.
That was one of the reasons again, this is a committee item, and they had 7 members, and they really kicked this around a lot. So I'm going to stay with their recommendation, but I would like to see 2 years or something added for clarification for the person reading this ordinance.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll move that wording be applied that it is a 2-year. We do state when it has to be paid. That's in the ordinance, and it's a March date. For those that missed it. So I'd go with whatever the planning department does as far as making sure that they understand biannual didn't work. So come up with some wording that would indicate item number 3 would be 2 years. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded to allow the planning department to adopt wording such that item number 3, license fee, 1,000, does stretch over a period of 2 years. Discussion from the audience. From the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a question, how that compares with other things that we charge licensing fees for?
The only other licensing fee we have for is for the septic. That's the only other license that we have. Or I guess in the contractor's license, an installer license, but those are certifications. But this one's higher. So,
To help you out there, Kevin, the actual quote was that the $500 per year doesn't come to the total rent on some of these for one day. So they felt it was something that was important, if especially the commissioner saw fit to apply more fees to help the enforcement of the ordinance. That came up again and again from the committee, not me.
Okay. Okay. I
I'm not,
understand.
I'm gonna stick by their thoughts there. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Chairman, if I could we change this in J1B, this to 319K on page 7? It's under J1B. It says set
Oh,
forth.
there it is,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, okay. And this section, oh, it does. Okay. Well, then forget it. I think it's okay.
We don't need to change the wording? All right. We're back to page 8. Anything else on page 8?
I'd like to get some clarification. So if a person comes in and wants to set up a vacation home rental, and a special use permit, $500. The next thing they would pay then for us would be the license fee to start off with, 1,000, and then 2 years down the road, another 1,000. Is that correct?
Let me see how that wording is. My understanding was the licensing was after the permit was already, so it would be the first year, because that's how we do it
Right.
with the septic. We don't make it do it
Yeah.
at the initial approval.
So the
It's,
$500 would cover you the first 2 years, and then at the end of that, it would be the $1,000.
Correct.
Where does the review fee come in for $500?
It varies versus conditional use permit and special use permit. Go ahead.
right, so a review fee would be a situation where you would have a complaint, or you have issues, you have a change in ownership, you have a
Like a
change in the.
review of a contingent use permit. Okay.
Right.
All right.
It's an actual review where there's, it comes in front of this commission. So,
Thank you. Anything else? Well, I guess you're on 9, and that looks a little short, other than the recommendation to approve. Any other questions for Brittany? Anyone from the audience want to talk about this before we put any motion on the table? Then the chair would address a motion.
I move we approve ordinance amendment OA 23-01 with the amendments made today.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve, per staff's recommendation, approval of ordinance amendment OA 23-01. Discussion. From the audience. From the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now, Brittany, why don't you go ahead and explain where this goes from the future, especially if we have people in the audience that.
sure, so now the recommendation from the planning commission, it will actually have to be advertised. So do you know what the next advertising dates? It'll probably be at a meeting end of September, beginning of October.
It'll either be September 19th or the first meeting October 3rd.
October
3rd.
I would say it would be on the October 3rd, because that will give staff time to make the changes that the planning commission recommended. And then for Jerry, our office, to advertise it. So we'll plan on the October 3rd Board of Commissioners meeting.
Thank you. And I know you'd want to say this too, and Ron, I can't express enough how hard, having sat through those meetings, these people discussed and bumped heads, whatever. There was never any clear, like, just float this through. Those folks did a heck of a job, and they put it forward, and it's not perfect, and we're not perfect. But I can't and I think I can express for the planning commission too, what an effort came forward as far as dealing with the people and the problems.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to know if the committee, or if they're kind of on board with our thoughts of stricter enforcement of the ones that are not operating legally. Because the commission, we can take that stance, but I'd really like to see what the committee's thoughts. Are we on the right track with that?
I think you're going to hear about them. I expressed to them, and it's been this way historically that I know of. Once the committee's actions are done, that they're certainly allowed to bring up opposing or opinions on what the final matter is. They're just a citizen like anybody else, and I think you'll see some of them at your Board of Commissioners meetings.
If that's their desire, we need to hear that, because it makes it easier for us to move that direction if we, especially if we get it from a committee that's worked so hard as they did.
Okay, and then the last thing I want to say is just for the commission, and that memo helped us move along, even though it took a long time. That memo was kind of a new thing. We might want to consider that a more difficult issues in the future by separating those, what would you call hot button items, Kevin, and get them out in the public and get them on the table. So I wanted to compliment that. That really worked well, I thought, for me as a chair. It's a way to keep order. Thank you. Now we're on to item number 18.
Kelsey Roush, agenda item number 18 is a conditional use permit CU 23-28 to allow a telecommunication building on the subject property. The applicant is Golden West Telecommunications with Casey Weaver as the agent. Location is 23505 First Avenue in Caputa. The lot size is only 0.11 acres. Right now it is vacant of anything. The property owner is still, or Golden West has not yet bought the property. They are trying to get approval of this conditional use permit prior to buying the property. The property owner is the property to the north. This house, they actually still own this property. They did sign the application and everything. They were fine with this supposed use. There was I think two things came up from the county highway department. They are asking that the access road, which would be First Avenue, be improved to ordinance 14 standards. The applicant may work with the county highway department to possibly request an exception, but that's between them and the highway department. There is a picture of the proposed building on page 4. Basically, this is just to build this building to help expand the telecommunications to the east. They would meet all of the setbacks for suburban residential district. They're proposing a holding tank just because there would be limited use, and there would not be enough space for a drain field on the lot, along with the building and parking. So.
Questions for Kelsey?
So Mr. Duval is selling this to Golden West?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Other questions for Kelsey? I've got one. When we see a pre-designed building like that, do we, or does the provider or owner look at it from our building permit requirements? Do we try to get it to blend in?
Mm-hmm.
Do we run into difficulties when it's a national, or have you run into any? That's good to hear, because sometimes you see where things are built in conflict to one building background to another. That's a good job by the provider in the first place. Thank you. Anything else for Kelsey? Anyone here in the audience that's here to speak on that item? Chair to address the motion.
I move we approve CU 23-28 Golden West Telecommunications.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve CU 23-28 with 10 conditions. Discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 19.
Okay, Kelsey Roush, conditional use permit item 19 CU 23-29 is to allow a home occupation to make and sell ceramics on the subject property. The applicant and owner is Joy Johnson and Errol Flynn. They do live on the property. That location is 14938 Backcountry Trail, lot size 3.01 acres. The staff does recommend approval. I think they are located off of East Highway 44. There's 20 conditions. They have actually over the weekend completed several of the conditions that I had added, including a fire extinguisher, the smoke detector. They've gone through the outlet cover that was missing. They fixed that. They also added metal along the wall back where it was close to where the kiln is actually located. They are inside the city's 1 mile septic jurisdiction. They do need to obtain an operating permit with the city. I will go over that with them once we're done with the meeting. We did not receive any complaints for the property. Originally, there was a complaint about this that was brought to our attention to our ordinance officer, and then we made contact with them. They were unaware that they would need a conditional use permit or any other any permit out in the county because they had done this same business inside city limits. They are in the audience if you have questions for them.
Questions for Kelsey? I just have one. They do then some retail, or what you would call people that stop.
I
and
do
buy their
believe you'll have to
supplies.
ask them approximately how many customers they have. So.
Not concerned. I just wanted, we don't usually see a lot of home occupations that have some retail, but in this case where there's been no complaints and no complaints since we published, that certainly negates some of my question. Any other questions for Kelsey?
Just one, and the same as Charlie, I was curious about the walk-in traffic. The other one, on the analysis number 3, it goes down through and it says people are not allowed in the detached accessory structure. Detached, is that this one that we're looking at?
Yes.
Okay, so it is part of that, all right.
Yep.
That's all I had.
Perhaps, just for the record, we probably should have the applicant here in regards to the retail, since there were 2 commissioners that spoke on it. So, and they're here. Just either one of you, and just please introduce yourself for the record, and we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Errol Flynn. We live on the property and sell ceramics.
We had the one question on retail. How much of your business does go to retail? And is it more like wholesale because they pick up their supplies?
Yes, people just come in and pick up supplies that they order. And as far as people going inside of that structure, the deepest they might walk into the structure is 15 feet. So, and then they was talking about fire hazards and all of that. We put metal around the kilns with 4 foot high. So, and all of the outlets, we fixed all of them. We put the fire extinguisher up, the smoke detector, and
I assume you put the fire extinguisher at the level that you were advised to, which sometimes it can be a weird level. I know that.
yeah, it was under 5 feet, no higher than 5 feet for under a 40-pound fire extinguisher. So.
Thank you. Mike?
No, so you're not dealing in onesies, twosies, you're dealing more of bulk to suppliers.
Yes, we supply clay to the schools and stuff, in which they will come and pick it up. We have trucks come in. We have maybe 2 trucks a year.
Oh.
And our clay that comes in on them trucks is the last thing on their truck. So there's no destruction to the road or anything. We have more UPS and stuff coming in there that would make any hazard on the road. So.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn, I appreciate it.
Yep.
Chair would address a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of CU 23-29.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve conditional use permit 23-29 per staff's recommendation with 20 conditions. Discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to item number 21.
Cookie Stack Environmental Planner. Item 20 is conditional use permit amendment CU 14-23. It's to allow an existing seasonal helipad to be used year-round. The applicant and landowners Keystone Ventures. Location of the property is 24035 Highway 16, currently zoned Highway Service District. Access is off Highway 16A, and there is no special flood hazard area on the property. The zoning ordinance lists 7 criteria that the planning commission may consider in the review of the conditional use permit application. Those answers are on the screen. Again, this is already operating. They're just requesting to operate it 4 more months out of the year than they're allowed to, currently under the conditions. So they do meet the criteria. This was routed out for interdepartmental review. No objections or concerns were received. Again, this currently operates as a seasonal helipad. The current condition read that they could operate April through December 31st, and they would just like to be able to operate January through April as well. So with that, staff is recommending approval of conditional use permit amendment CU 14-23 with conditions.
Questions for Cody?
I have one. I hike a mountain bike in the areas where these helicopters operate. I'm not crazy over in the first place just because of the noise and what it does to the animals. I guess my concern is finally when the tourists leave, we're quiet, it's wintertime. I really don't want to have helicopters going back over in the middle of winter. Now, this is a personal thing for me. The rest of you have your own opinions, and it's probably not the same as mine. But they also talk in the analysis about has to take off every 2 weeks between January and April, but I assume you could mothball a helicopter and you wouldn't have to do that, from what I understand of the FAA rules.
That would be a question for the applicant. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if he is in the audience.
Okay. That's my opinion.
Would you like the applicant to come
It'd
forward
be fine,
and
yes,
answer
if you
your
wish to
question?
come up, you bet.
I have to have you introduce yourself just for the record, and you can go on from there.
Good morning, Commissioners. Andrew Busby, Keystone Adventures. To answer your question, stipulation on the engine manufacturers is run the aircraft every 14 days for 1 hour. It is possible to mothball aircraft as the military does. That's not something commercially I think that's viable. It's a pretty big process. And for us, safety is our #1 imperative. And so since we came before you in 2014, we've been running the helicopters 1 hour every 14 days and frequenting the same area. Commissioner Lewis, I do share your same concerns about the noise nuisance. We've been in front of this commission at least 6 to 8 times with annual renewals of the conditional use permit. It's always a valid concern. I think looking back, if you dig through this conditional use permit in particular, a little bit different. This is the opportunity for Pennington County to regulate the helicopters a little bit more than what we've seen since inception in 1961. We too feel that helicopters do provide a service, but also a nuisance. And as an operator, we try to balance out that nuisance and that service. If you look, we sent Pennington County our no-fly areas, and I think if you looked at that, you would see where we're flying. There are 2 operators in the Black Hills, and so I would question, maybe with your concerns where the other operators are at. I'm not trying to deflect, but just provide you with some accurate data as to where we are going and when we operate.
I've got a question. Do Life Flight and National Guard use your place year-round too?
They have in the past. Remember, the conditional use permits regulates the tourism activities, and so we too have used our heliport for non-tourist activities, most recently last year during the blizzards, providing food and transportation for elderly and people without heat on the Rosebud Indian Reservation when the National Guard couldn't respond to that.
Okay. But they do use it it could be possibly used year-round for their purposes
Well,
as
our understanding was the heliport itself was only limited to commercial tourist activities. And what we're asking for is not, 4 months, but actually the additional 3 months out of the year for occasional tourist activities. Basically, when somebody shows up, we'd like to say, hey, yeah, we can fly you. We don't see a great increase in the number of visits during that time frame, but I thought it made sense to ask for that full 365 days. Again, we started this over 9 years ago with Pennington County and the commissioners and this board. To this date, I don't think we've had a single complaint. In fact, the neighbors asked if they would like to come here and help promote and support this agenda item.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair, just a statement that I've used their services, and I think other commissioners have, and I got to admit, of the three that I'm aware of, that's probably one of the most professional operators that I've seen in the Black Hills. If you go up to the facility, you'll see the quality of construction and how it's run, and so I just wanted to point that out. I think you're looking at a pretty solid operator.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Rosknecht. And also, too, if you look through the conditional use permit requirements, we have stipulated timeframes in which we can operate it. So that's the only company in the Black Hills that has that time limit on them. So we run from 9 to 6 during non-peak season, which is Memorial Day up till Labor Day, and then 9 to 7 from Memorial Day to Labor Day. So we have that. And then we also reduce the number of aircraft in the air to 2 at any given time. And so we're trying to make these improvements to, improve helicopter tourism in the Black Hills to address some of the concerns of the commissioners here today. We also stipulate a minimum altitude, and we try to promote left-hand turns. And we've been trying to set an example. I've also included to Pennington County our recommendations to the FAA and the Black Hills Aerial Safety Council for getting all the helicopter operators on the same page to increase safety and also decrease nuisance.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Any other things for the staff? Questions for the staff? Hearing none. Chair would address a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve conditional use permit amendment CU 14-23 per staff's recommendations with 16 conditions.
Second.
Anyone from the audience? Discussion? Discussion from the commission? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Who voted no on that?
Mike.
All right, we're on to item number 21.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we combine 21 and 22 for purposes of discussion, but vote separately on them.
Second.
Moved and seconded to combine agenda item number 21 and 22 for discussion purposes only. It's my job to note to you that it takes a 2/3 vote to do that, and that when upon completion of the discussion, each item must be voted upon separately. Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. You may treat for discussion purposes only 21 and 22 together.
Megan Talmadge, planner. Agenda item number 21 and 22 is comprehensive plan amendment and rezone application, CA 23-06 and RZ 23-09, is to change the future land use and the current zoning from rural residential district to low-density residential district. The applicant is Adam and Sharon Weaver, and their agent is Sarah Cheddar. The location is 23679 Strata Rim Drive, and the portion that will be affected is 0.74 acre. The current zoning is rural residential, and the existing land use is residential. There is no special flood hazard on the property. This item was last heard on August 1st in front of the Board of Commissioners, and the request was denied without prejudice. Since then, the applicant has revised their preliminary subdivision plan to include improvements to the road. The easement would be increased to 66 feet, and they have intent to widen the road to the 20-foot minimum. Because the road does not currently meet that standard, staff does have to recommend denial still on this. But a building permit cannot be issued if the road is not increased to that minimum width.
Thank you. Questions for the staff? No questions. That's amazing, huh? Gonna let you off, Megan. And the applicant's here? You wanna speak, or do you wanna hear what the commission kicks around for discussion first? Understood. Go ahead, Mike.
But the thing I think we've talked about before is the 0.74 acres. Okaying this, what does this do for the future until this road's put in? You know, somebody else can come along and say, hey, wait a minute, you guys okayed this, why don't you let us do it? I guess that would be my concern.
Okay. Any other thoughts from commissioners before we have it come?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I've sat down with Megan and we've tried to find a compromise here, but the compromise wouldn't be 0.78 or 0.74 acres. It would be taking that larger lot and trying to do a 3-acre lot and then do what, 2.6, 2.8, and then come in and ask for a lot size variance. I can handle that, and that would be that's the direction that I was going. I still have a hard time with the 0.74 acres. It just doesn't seem like there's enough skin in the game to do what they're trying to do.
Anyone else like to weigh in? That's my biggest hang-up too. It's not the road, it's the size of the lot and what we're doing. We're setting precedent, building requirements, our zoning requirements, everything. A tiny lot out of a bigger piece, I don't understand that, and I don't understand why it's not being understood that this also affects other zoning areas once we do these sort of things and make this procedure. If we forward this to the Board of Commissioners for approval, we're recommending to them to open a door that I don't think we want to open door on. I think you couldn't get it shut again. And I realize we had and we certainly received from Mr. Miller conversation in that regard. But I'm not sure it's understood when you sit up here and you have to make these recommendations and they involve all the zoning districts, how tough that gets sometimes. I just can't support the size of it has little to do with the road. I think we can get together on a road, but not the size of the property. Anyone else? You knew you were going to head up after that one, didn't you? Go right ahead. Just please introduce yourself for the record.
I am Sarah Cheddar. I am the agent for the owners. And we do know that it was the larger lot size, but actually it was a recommendation by the Board of Commissioners to leave it at the lot size and the requirement of changing the road, because then it was brought up with changing it to a 2.74, 2.86, or whatever the lot size would be, and then changing the zoning, that there would be nothing preventing that lot then to being subdivided down further. If it was changed still, because it would still be changed to is it rural or suburban? I get them switched. The larger lot size, less than 3 acres. So that would possibly open the door, if you did rezone it down to the smaller lot size, that then you could subdivide that lot 2 more times. And then it was the Board of Commission's recommendation, and that's where the road came from, or the road recommendation came from, was from there. So that's why we came back here with that recommendation after a couple of different meetings with some folks on that board.
I'm going to weigh in here first, Sarah. I guess I don't, breaking a lot down that's 2.8 versus one that's 0.7 in the first place.
Yep.
I don't remember that coming through my mind or any of the conversation that we had up here.
Nope, it wasn't in this meeting. It was actually
Oh,
in the Board of Commission meeting
I
that brought it
understand
up.
now.
So when it got
Well, it wasn't
rezoned,
commissioners per se, it was the real commissioners,
it was the other.
the elected ones.
I'm starting
We're
to get
just-
all the meetings.
Don't blame me. We're the appointed ones.
Yes.
Ron represents one of the real ones, got elected.
It's the other alternating meeting, not this one.
Okay.
So it was folks on that board that said, hey, if you actually do subdivide this lot or do change the zoning on this lot down to this, and you change it to a 2.8 acre lot, that's opening the door to then, not that they would, but opening the door then, okay, it's zoned to subdivide it down 2 or 3 more times after that.
Then I would have just answered you that 6 of one and half a dozen the other.
I
That
know,
could
so
be
that-
done anyway.
That's where we're stuck between is we just needed the direction on one way or the other, where to go with it.
I'm convinced that you don't want to break your 2.8 lot down once it's there and you've got your
Right.
unit that you want on it.
We just want to build.
But I'm not, you have to understand the concern I have of putting .74
Absolutely.
out here in an area, which I was really surprised at the neighborhood support you got, because that area on other issues has been very, very articulate about being happy with new type of things. And historically, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and it's a nice area.
It's wonderful.
So that's my hanger. It's the size of that lot, and I don't think anyone here has any problem with a 2.8. I don't think they had problems with before. But you're correct, I can't speak for the Board of Commissioners. If they had problems with 2.8,
And
I
that-
don't know whether they read everything you've already submitted.
Well, and we actually sat down at a meeting outside of that meeting too to further clarify anything, and that was the guidance was we needed to go, because I'm sure you're tired of seeing my face, and I'm tired of taking your time, but just trying to figure out, you tell us which way to go, and that was what we were told to run with, was improving the road but leaving the lot size. So that's kind of where we are now, that's what we ran with after that last meeting.
I'd like to get your thing done and gone with, and I think we gave some good direction the last time, so again, I hope without prejudice, so it doesn't cost again, but I mean, I don't know where the Board of Commissioners can, but they've turned us down before, it wouldn't be the first step. Go ahead.
So I'm Sharon Weaver, I'm the owner, with my husband Adam. So I think their concern is not us per se splitting it up down the road, but the next set of people. So 30, 40 years plus down the road, at which point the new people that would purchase it could potentially split it up. Another note that I kind of want to make is that we're hearing from our neighbors quite frequently asking us, have you been approved yet? Have you been approved yet? Like, when are you going to start building? Like, we have pretty wide community support in our development area.
Charlie, I have
Go ahead.
a question. Let's say we did approve this, when would you be able to pull the trigger on the road improvements? Have you talked to a contractor or?
That is me. Yep, the other conversation that we had was, we didn't want to go ahead and improve the road without knowledge of, yes, we're going to get a building permit, because it's the last thing we want to do is take money out of their pocket to improve a road and then go, haha, just kidding, we're not going to give you one. So as soon as we have permission to get a building permit, we've been waiting, we've been in hiatus on this for about 8 months.
So the commissioners made the recommendation that they thought it was probably going to be okay if you did improve the road? Is that what I got out of this?
The last meeting of I know planning is one and commission is the other, but the last meeting that we had was, they wanted to see the road improvement, not the lot size change.
Okay, interesting.
but the road improvements right now still don't meet the guidelines of what the other, and I think we can get the guidelines of what the other in better order, right?
Well, and I think
We're recommending denial at this
Megan
point.
has.
Yep, we still do have to recommend denial because the infrastructure is currently not in place. If it was
All
in
right.
place, we would be able to recommend approval. Did that answer the question?
If I was them, I wouldn't do the road with the planning commission coming from one direction and the board
That's
of
our worry.
commissioners coming from the other.
Correct.
I think I would sit home and worry about Sundays, having to go to the meeting on Monday. Okay, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not sure I'd venture out on that tree limb.
Well, that's why we don't want to start anything until we actually have somebody that says, yes, this, and that's all we've been looking for this entire time is, this is what you need to do, and then you can have the permit. But that's the cruddy thing is we're getting, this half wants the 2.8 acres and this half wants the road improvement. And we just need somebody to say, this is what we're going to go with, so we can run with it and be done.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think the main goal here is to have another structure for
Correct.
family members.
Yes.
And we agreed that without doing a lot split, you could put a modular home there and not have to do a lot split. And now you got a second structure.
I'm pretty sure the neighbors would not be in favor of a modular home. That was not what they were presented with. That was not the discussion we had ever had. They all have the floor plans of the stick-built home that we are hopefully moving forward with. I think that if we came back to them with a modular, they would tell us probably to pound sand.
I think she's right. I think some of their neighbors support, that's a very pretty tight-knit community out there in regards to what goes on and how they look at things, just having served on the commission before.
And
I can remember a number of items that came through from out there.
And I did get a phone call. There was one set of neighbors that we didn't speak with because there was one house directly across the street from Adam and Sharon that was for sale. I did receive a phone call from that homeowner. She says, hey, I got your phone number. Kind of not sure what's going on because that was the one individual that I didn't have the chance or we didn't have the chance to give all of the plans to. And I explained everything so that I could email it to her. She goes, no, that's totally fine. That doesn't bother me whatsoever.
And since then, we have talked to her and her husband quite extensively, and they're excited as well. So they're on board.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I recall the commission meeting that we discussed this, it was the size of the .74 that probably had most of the commissioners concerned. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I think the applicant mentioned that, do you know what that land would be worth?
Correct.
And it shouldn't be worth what it's worth. It should be, are we following policy? You know, I can't control what it's worth.
Well, and the conversation there was then putting somebody who is retired on a fixed income, that obviously changes the taxes that they'll end up paying. And we've had discussions about that. Is it feasible? Can we build the home on that, but leave the land in Adam and Sharon's name so they keep the taxes? And I mean, that's kind of a different ball of wax that opens up because it turns a possible $300,000 house into a $500,000 house really quick when you change the lot size too.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can you refresh my memory on if we went with a larger lot size, that changed the road requirement? Oh, I thought that they could get a different access coming in that would eliminate that.
Commissioners, Brittany Molitor, Planning Director. If you look at the road design standards, it's right underneath the photo. It says for agriculture, ranch at low density and rural residential. So currently, right now, it's rural residential. The road isn't at standard right now. It's even subpar for the current zoning that exists out there. So staff didn't support it because going to an even higher density didn't make sense as far as the road improvements. So, but they're the same for either zoning district.
Who all uses that road? Is it a number of people that use that road, or is it one, just these guys?
There are 2 houses that actively use that road.
Okay.
Huh? They're year-round, yeah.
However, correct me if I'm wrong, if they came up with a different way to approach the house, we have driveways, accesses that serve 2 houses, and
So-
those sort of things are within. allowable.
That was discussed coming off a Strato Rim and
Mhm.
putting a driveway from Strato Rim right to the property, the proposed property. But then what you're doing is you're creating a driveway right alongside a road, and you have two parallel roads.
We've got that out in, not far from the old fireside at the college deal out there. We've got one of those. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's been in existence for a long time.
And if we're going for aesthetics and keeping the neighbors happy as well, that kind of
Yeah.
puts a damper on that a little bit.
Make
Draw
it
a smiley face or something.
aesthetically pleasing. To me, that's such a little item versus trying to put the thing. The other thing is the size of the lot we're talking about normally has public utilities. I mean, we're all not even, that's the elephant in the room. Normally, we would see public utilities on that lot.
The only utility that's not public would be septic.
Yeah.
There's association water out there, and we've already got recommendation by the water board. The transformer is directly behind this lot. It's probably 75 feet to where the house is going to end up. And then we already have spoken with MDU, and when the road improvement happens, that utility trench runs right there anyway. Because the gas line that's currently running parallel to Aeronauts Way only services the one house that's actually accessed towards the old gas station. So the utility trench would be dug in, and then that essentially would become the new road, is that direction to get gas back to that house. And that's already been discussed with MDU.
Property changes hands in the future. We've looked at yurts, we've looked at tents, we've looked at vacation home rentals, tiny homes. And all of this is setting on the horizon on that one piece of tiny property. And I just can't see that we can apply, in my mind, but they've got their own rules, consistency to planning. That's the name of the commission. Planning doesn't, when I know all these other things exist and down the road, maybe within the 3 years I've got left, I'm going to see something. I never thought there would be a day when I thought that we would be looking at a tent with no bathroom, no hard lighting, the dangers of hail around or anything else being approved as a place for somebody to stay. So I see this as the same thing. We're getting out into areas where the sky's the limit on what you can do to things. And when we're already taking a piece of property that meets the zoning and the ordinances in that, I just can't see looking the other way and making the thing that much smaller. There is a way to do this, and if the Board of Commissioners, I can't understand what they're thinking when there's versus a 2.8. I see purpose to a 2.8. And that is that it meets what you want to do with your property right now. Where 7/10 does not involve good planning for the Pennington County. So that's the way I see it.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Sarah, does that run into issues with septic on a .74? Don't you need an acre?
No, you need 1 acre if you don't have association water. If you had a well,
okay.
you only need a half an acre if you have, and Megan can probably clarify that. You only need a half an acre if you're doing septic but have association water.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. That's where this whole thing actually started, was that exact question.
Megan Talmadge Planner, that is correct. She's saying 20,000 feet.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. You get to hear the rest of the discussion. We'll go from there. I appreciate it. I have a lot of empathy for what you've gone through, and Chair and address a motion so we can get it open to discussion. We are either going to support what the staff is recommending, which is denial, and again, without prejudice, or approval for the first one. We've got to look at a motion and be on item 21.
I'd make a motion that we deny comprehensive plan amendment CA 2306. without prejudice.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to deny 23-06 per staff's recommendation. Discussion.
Deny without prejudice.
Yes.
That was the motion.
Yes, without prejudice.
Okay.
Per staff's recommendation. They do have without prejudice this time. And we are losing one commissioner. You're safe. You're going to be safe from this whole one. 2 votes. All right. Kevin, have a good time. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would second the opinion of the correspondence that we got from one of the neighbors out there, that there is such a runaround going on, something that should be doable without going back here and back there and back here and back there. And I applaud the patience of the applicants there. I don't have the exact answer, but there's got to be something that can be done here and not be going back and forth 10 times. This has been going on for, when did this start? 10 months ago.
It's just ridiculous.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think we need to kick this upstairs. It needs to be resolved by the board. We're a planning commission, we're not a policy-making commission, and we get terribly creative at times, thank goodness. But I think this is an issue that the county board needs to resolve, period. And I don't think we should feel uncomfortable kicking this one upstairs. So that's why I'm in favor of denial, because I think the responsibility needs to go to the county board.
That is the appropriate way, by the way. It would not be conducive to send this without recommendation.
Why did this come back to us? Because we moved to deny without prejudice the first time and went to the board. Why do we have it back?
Megan Talmadge, planner. They've changed their plans to accommodate for the road size. If they had built the road at this time, we, with our subdivision regulations, would have recommended approval.
But they aren't going to build the road because they don't know that it's going to get approved. So we're in this
Yep.
loop.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
That comes to the commission. I just don't think they're gonna be in favor of this .74. I can probably tell you that right now. So I think what we would do is if that lot was divided a little more fairly, we would probably consider a lot size variance to get things going. I think that's the direction that the commission would go. But if you bring this back to the commission, .74 acres, I don't think it's gonna fly. So that's trying to save people time.
What is the process for a lot size variance?
They would apply for the variance, get on the agenda. It's similar to just something that goes straight to the Board of Commissioners. It doesn't go through Planning Commission.
So there's additional costs. All the costs they've paid so far
Yes.
are just.
However, Ren, I got to point out that was kind of, and I think you were sitting here. It seemed to be the thinking here was the .74 was the problem too.
Yeah, the commission might have the discretion to waive, some application fees, so there's something that you could be considered.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Right.
That is a good point. Board of Commissioners, and that should be noted for the record, can waive application fees
Right.
with reason for specific items. No.
In our ordinance, they can only waive penalty fees.
Penalty fees. Oh. That must have been changed. We must have sent through one of those changes. And they used to waive. I agree with her. Okay, we're always learning. We try to stretch further out, and we learned we can't do that. Any other discussion? From the audience, from the commission. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, did you get that? 4-2. Now we've got to do item number 22. We need a motion on item number 22.
I'd make a motion to deny rezoning 2309 without whatever.
Without prejudice.
Prejudice, yes, without prejudice.
I'll second that motion.
Moved and seconded.
Second.
Oop.
Somebody.
To deny per staff's recommendation, rezone 23-09. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Okay. That one was different. Okay, you got it. All right. Well, thank you. It might be wise if all the planning commissioners did let the Board of Commissioners know that what they were thinking. And I'll leave it go at that. I intend to speak to them. I get to speak to a lot of them because they'll come and ask me questions about the meeting. So I certainly will voice my opinion on this matter. Go ahead, Cody.
Okay, Cody Stack, environmental planner. Item number 23 is conditional use permit CU 23-26. It's to allow a motor vehicle rental on the subject property. So this was heard at the August 14th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. It was continued to address the office trailer and the parking. So from staff's point of view, with the subject property being located within the 100-year floodplain, we would prefer to see that structure be a temporary structure like a trailer. It can be temporarily there for 180 days as long as it's moved. It's just a better use than putting a permanent structure inside the floodplain. For parking, currently when the commercial structure was built, they show 42 parking spaces on that plan. A retail store requires one parking for every 200 square feet of space. There's 5,000 square feet of space in there, so 25 parking spaces are needed for that structure. The UTV car rental would require 27 parking spaces, so there'd be a total of 52 parking spaces needed, so an additional 10 would have to be added. There is quite a bit of space up here in this area that would accommodate more than 10 parking spaces, and the applicant has spoken with the owner of the property about graveling more area for parking and providing a parking plan prior to the next review that shows adequate parking. So staff is recommending approval of conditional use permit CU 23-26 with conditions.
Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead.
Cody, I asked for site plan.
Yeah, and it didn't get included in there. I apologize. So the site plan that shows the parking that Jeff submitted with his building permit shows parking along this front edge right here, along this back edge behind where they're building that commercial or the drive-through coffee shop in the front and along the side here. And it shows 42 parking spaces.
So there is a site plan that shows that to scale?
Yeah, and I apologize that it wasn't in here. I can email that to you after this meeting.
And also, relative to restroom facilities, it says that there's so if I understand it, that building is divided into 4 bays. One's occupied by the Barbell, one's occupied by Brant Construction, and one's a t-shirt shop. Is one empty?
I am not currently aware of what's all in there. So the only on the permit that Jeff submitted was unfinished commercial structure. So any work that was done inside that to subdivide it off or anything was unpermitted. So I can't say what's fully inside.
Yes, before I can really approve this in my own mind, is I want to see a lease agreement that actually gives that lessee the right to use the restroom, because if it is in one of those bays and it's an empty bay, then I would assume that the lessee could rent that bay and have a 911 address in the case of an emergency. If they're using an empty bay and it's rented and there's not something in the lease agreement that guarantees the restroom facility for that operation, because the trailer's mobile, everything's mobile, I just don't see any, just a little concerning to me.
Yeah, and the applicants in the audience to speak to any lease agreements, I'm not aware of what his specific lease
But a lease
agreements
agreement
are.
would stipulate, you got the right for 20, you've got the right to use this restroom. The beginning of the lease is this date, terminates on this date, and it sets forth all the conditions. Without that lease agreement, we're approving something that really doesn't have any footings.
Let's finish the questions with you first, please. Any other questions for Cody first? I want to make a statement to you. What would I put it? I wasn't in agreement with the flux of the situation at this particular location, but I am in agreement with your recommendation as it sits right now, because it allows some time for this particular new tenant to get some of the things that got addressed at the last meeting attended to with his landlord, as well as himself, and takes us into next year, and the signs, the gravel. I'm not sure that I'm worried about having gravel down there before the next season opens. In other words, it's not that critical of an item in my mind right this minute. I would like to give, because I think it's critical to his business, and as a planning commission, I've always taken a lot of concern that we're not asking some business person to end their business and wait until they get me happy. You know, I want to give them time for that. So I guess I'm supporting where you're coming from. I realize I was one of them that brought up too. I'm not sure what all locations. The coffee shop isn't open yet, this sort of thing. But all that can't happen just at the click of a fingers, and I realize that after listening to the applicant last time. Is that what we're looking at here? Do you feel comfortable with this?
Yes, so I had a conversation with the applicant prior to the meeting about working through, really his season ends in a month. He's done in a month. So some of these issues, and then it won't start up again until next April or May. I think he doesn't start his till May. So will have all winter to work through some of these issues about the office, the parking, signs, lease agreements, and different things like that. It gives him some time to do that, because really he's really got a month. After all said and done, right now he's got a month left of just this season, and all of that's going to be removed off the property.
And he has to be able to project to his people that he deals with, landlord, the bank, different people, suppliers, that he's got a solidified situation, and that's where I was coming from when we are asking him to hold for these other things. I think we're asking him to put his business on hold, and you can't do that. That's not fair. That's not right. When we're already, so that was where I was coming from. But I appreciate that you had a conversation with him. I do think that, and I don't want to underestimate some of the thoughts that were brought up by the planning commissioner are certainly going to be addressed the next time.
Correct, and staff understands the concerns of the planning commission, and I believe the applicant does too. But we'll have the winter. We'll have a couple months to work it out. The review's in March, so.
All right, my last question would be, and to honor what Commissioner Roskinek's throwing in, it might not hurt to make a brief little list. One is the trailer is of some contention, the parking lot, and how they're parked is some contention. There is, or appears to be, an undefined store or available unit, those sort of things. If we listed them, would that be something you could live with, so we'd know what we were addressing during this time?
It would, and there's some issues with, like I said, with that commercial structure. It was permitted as an unfinished commercial building, so any work that's been done inside of that was done without a building permit. So even approving this to the next review gives us time to address those issues with the current landowner as
And it
well.
affects his situation too.
Correct, yes.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
I guess I would go for some sort of list. Those three for sure have got to be on it. I don't know, additional signage, because I brought that up, was my strongest point. I do not really look forward to seeing additional signage on that particular outfit. So those 4 items, it would be only fair to, then he can also sit down with his landlord and say, hey, these are what they're talking about that that I have to comment on next time. But
Mr.
we
Chair.
could move it forward. I'm done. Go ahead.
So could we add a condition that we would want a lease agreement so that we know that he has the legal right to be on that property and the parameters of that legal right? That's only, that tells us a start date, an end date, and the conditions relative to asking for these.
Have we done that before?
So I'm not aware of us ever requiring a lease agreement. The landowner of the property has to sign the application, and which he did. So I'd assume if Mr. Wagner wasn't allowed to be on the property, Jeff Devaney wouldn't have signed the application. But I'm not aware of any time that we've required a
Ron, I'm
lease
not sure
agreement.
his lease agreement couldn't be a handshake. That's still allowed in the court. But we do ask the property owner to sign the application. But I don't know of any other. I'm not aware that we ever asked for a lease agreement from anybody else.
Well, I'm just thinking outside the box because it says that there's a restroom available. If there's a restroom available, it's in one of the bays. And if there's an empty bay, then maybe they should be renting that bay opposed to having a mobile trailer out there. That's where I'm coming from.
That certainly would be a fair fifth item. You wrote down 4 is available restroom facilities. And you used to always call those what? Planning Commission concerns?
Yeah.
Okay. Then we haven't done anything new or ventured out in any new areas. Any other questions for Cody? Thank you, Cody. Does the applicant still want to? You certainly can come up if we ruffle your feathers while we're doing it, or you can wait. Have you heard anything here that's going to goof you up? Please introduce yourself for the record.
Mike Wagner, owner of Team Car and UTV Rentals. No, I mean, I appreciate you realizing that I can't operate not knowing where I'm going to go. So I'm trying to solidify this location as my location for the foregoing future, okay, if I can. And I would just say that I did talk to Jeff again. If you've driven by there recently, the signage is completely, it has changed a bunch. I got him to take down a lot of the extra stuff out there. I asked him to do that once before because they were pretty much covering me up. So I couldn't even be seen. The only signage I have is a rent me sign on the top of a unit and then my trailer. And I don't intend to have any additional signage unless there's like a billboard that comes available or something I can say, you know, I'm right there. But that would be the existing billboard that's right there. And there hasn't been any opportunity for me to take advantage of there, so I haven't. As far as the lease agreement goes, it is a handshake, and that's Jeff's choice, not mine. I wanted a lease agreement. I knew that the bathroom thing would come up, so I had him write up a statement just saying that I had the ability to use and my customers had the ability to use the T-shirt shop's bathroom, which if you look on the building, it says that those are public restrooms. Anybody can use them. They have that on their signage, which they don't have a lack of signage, I agree. So my question, I guess, would be just, what are we approving or denying? Are we approving a conditional use permit to operate as is with the addition of gravel and outlining the parking? Or, I mean, how many
can
more
help
hoops,
you,
how many
and
more hoops
Cody
am I
can
jumping
too.
through?
We would be approving the conditional use permit, and there is 19 conditions. If those are the same ones you read, that's what we're looking at on our agenda. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Cody Sack, environmental planner. Most of the conditions in there are just standard conditions that we've put on other UTV like times. If you ever put in a wash facility, what you'd have to do for that, just different things. Mainly, it's how you operate now. If the planning commission wanted to put more conditions, stricter conditions on there, that'd be up to the planning commission to do. But staff has it written that, if you just provide us with a parking plan, add some gravel, get a temporary building permit for the trailer, then everything on our end would be, and if the conditional use permit was approved, everything on our end would be taken care of.
Well, and that's actually the only additional condition is we call it planning commission concerns that would come up at the review time. And I think we have 5. You listened to all of them.
And when is that review?
So the review is the first meeting in March.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Michael, what one of those bays is that restroom in that you have the right to use?
In the t-shirt shop.
In the t-shirt shop?
In the t-shirt shop, yep.
Is there an empty bay in that facility?
Not that I'm aware of. The t-shirt shop's got one space, and then there's a construction company, and then there's the weight room.
Okay.
And those are the 3 that are in there. I think they're full. And then he has that coffee shop, which would be ideal. That would actually be about the perfect size.
It'd be nice
But it's a coffee shop.
to know that there's something in writing that allows you to use that restroom, because that's my only concern.
Yeah, and I have that. I don't have it with me.
We
but I
do
have
have
it.
that on the list of the 5.
So it's on the list of the 5 concerns. So when the review would come up, we would just ask you to submit a copy of that, and we'd put it in the packet for the planning commission to see.
Yep.
And I do believe our building permit shows 4 units. As you were saying, there's 4. And I think that T-shirt's got 2 of them, don't they?
So
I think you're right.
All that building permit shows us is a 5,000 square foot
Right.
structure. Anything that was built inside of it is unpermitted and would need to be taken care of.
Was a surprise package.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. But we'd work with Mr. Devaney, who's the landowner,
All right.
on that portion.
And I
of that.
believe you. You've done well with them before, you and Jason, so. Any other questions for the applicant or Cody while we've got them up here? Thank you, both of you. Chair will address the motion.
Mr. Chair, if we can address my concerns with the restroom facility, and that's guaranteed, I'll go ahead and make the motion to allow approved conditional use permit CU 23-26 with 19 conditions, and I don't know if.
It'd be 20 with
20,
the.
right, 20 conditions. That'd be my motion.
With wording that indicates it's the planning commission's concerns at review. Is that correct, Cody?
Yeah.
And you have some other ones to.
Yeah.
He doesn't sound totally behind us right there yet. So go ahead.
I'm just trying to come up with the wording so I address.
If you develop the wording that it applies to the review, that would satisfy, I think, the planning commission, and all of those items, all 5 of those items must be included.
Okay. So would something like that prior to the next review, the applicant submit a parking plan, a agreement, a restroom agreement, and then the concerns from the planning commission are addressed?
Designation on office, I agree with you. Some of it's going to have to be wording other than what we've used up here. The gravel, what's the basis? There's only those 5.
Yeah, and the gravel's already addressed in a different condition in there.
You bet.
Mr. Chair, I assume that building has a street address, but then normally in a building that's got multi-bays, it'll have Highway 385, Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3. In the case of an emergency, they're going to say, well, here's the address, but it's not Unit 1, 2, and 3, it's the...
Can I answer that, Cody? I think when the planning department resolves this with Mr. Devaney, there will be an additional address.
Okay.
items on this.
Correct. So when this was addressed, we only knew of one, it was one structure. We didn't know what was going in it or anything or how many. If it is subdivided into three, when they come in for the building permits for that, 3 address points would be issued, like it'll say unit 1, unit 2, unit 3, or however.
But
their
you're
address
correct,
according to
under
is that.
emergency management, there's gonna be some additional numbers.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Did we have a second?
No, I didn't think we got to a second yet, and that was discussion.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, and that goes on the chair, by the way. Didn't get it done, too much conversation. All right, everybody understand the motion? We're approving per staff's recommendation, and it would be 20 conditions. Discussion from the audience, from the commission. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. On to item number 24.
So item 24 is the county board report. The Board of Commissioners will hear the Planning Commission's recommendations from the August 14, 2023 Planning Commission meeting at their September 5th meeting. So they'll have last meeting's items and this meeting items on their agenda on September 5th.
Items from the public. Hi, public. How you doing? I'm not going to introduce you for the record. Thank you. Items from the staff. Items from the membership. I only have one, and I wanted to note, because I think it was such an important item, and we forget things, but Karen was the one that came up with, indirectly, she didn't call it a memo, but she came up with that idea when she wanted items listed separately in such a large ordinance amendment to be able to discuss those that had concerns. And that really changed the process, and I think it's one we ought to consider in the future on some too. Because we didn't have people angry and out of hand. I think it was a good job. I think it was an excellent idea in the first place, and we ended up using the title memo for it. So I just wanted to explain so that we don't forget who thought about that in the first place. It was a new way of reviewing it, and maybe something Board of Commissioners can note. Thank you. Any other items from the membership? Hearing none, all in favor of adjournment can give me a motion.
Move to adjourn.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn.
Who seconded that?
Karen,
Okay.
discussion. Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.